Hey friends, welcome to the Anselm Society St. Patrick's Day pub night, which is not on St. Patrick's Day. um, little did we know when we were planning this event back in January that we would not be able to have any gatherings on St. Patrick's Day, nor the date that we picked, June 5th, to postpone to. So we just really thought it was so important to have a get together. And I don't know about you, but I miss you guys. I really miss you guys a lot. And we didn't want to cancel this. So we're giving you an online evening of all kinds of Irish fun. We're going to treat you to some wonderful art that's been created by the Anselm Society Arts Guild. We have some literary art, some visual art. Then I really hope you're going to enjoy the pub band. We're all getting together actually in about an hour, and we're going to record a bunch of Irish tunes for you. And we hope that you love this evening. We really want to encourage you and bless you in the middle of the summer with some Irish fun. And by the way, if you are new to the Anselm Society and you're unfamiliar with who we are, please check out our website, anselmsociety.org. There's a lot of wonderful content on there. We have 3 podcasts. We have a bunch of videos that were recorded for our conference that we just held in April and May. Please go check that out. You've got to see that if you haven't seen it. All right, welcome and have a wonderful Irish evening. All right, friends, I am standing in for Chris Yeager, who is one of the wonderful visual artists with the Anselm Society. She wasn't able to join us tonight, and partly that's because there's a prayer request. We would really love for you all to be praying for her. She's not feeling very well because she's been dealing with some treatments for cancer. So please lift her up and pray for her and her husband, Paul. Before I show you Chris's piece, though, I want to read the prompt that Evangeline Denmark wrote for this evening. All of the artists of the Guild were given this prompt to encourage them to think of art, visual, literary, musical, that they could present to you. And here it is. The Celtic faith tradition is rooted in the stuff of the physical world, in the rituals of home and work, hearth and field. But the realm of the spirit is as near as the next bend in the road, tangible as the heat from a fire. To follow in the traditions of the Celtic saints is to walk the dusty roads of this world with the air of another land filling your lungs. Irish theologian Neil McDermott O'Donoghue says, if one does not understand the nearness and apprehensibility of this other world, of the angels and saints, there is no hope at all of understanding Celtic Christianity. How does the spirit realm bleed into your life and into your art? Where do you sense a threshold between the seen and the unseen? For our St. Patrick's Day pub night, we'd love to see pieces that explore the wonder of the Irish cultural and or spiritual heritage, be that a visual representation of St. Patrick's breastplate, a story of encountering the fair folk on a walk at dusk, or an original song or musical composition that captures the stark beauty of a monastic life, or any representation of the kingdom as it breaks through into your life and art. Our hope is to both receive and share the gifts of the Irish other world. All right. So, Chris responded with this beautiful piece. Hope you can see that. Celtic knotwork cross. While you look at that, I'm going to read what she said about it. She says, I fell in love with Celtic knotwork when I saw images of illuminations from the Book of Kells and the Lindisfarne Gospels when I was in college. I started experimenting with it myself, especially when I found a book that taught the reader how to do knotwork. I don't do it as often as I used to, but when making art with a cross, I really like to create one with knotwork of some sort. I always like to include what I call the halo, the round area framing the cross. The complexity of the knotwork reflects the complexity of our lives. It's complex, but God provides and is in control. So our lives can be beautiful knotwork patterns. There is gold paint on the halo and on the knotwork. Because God provides and is in control, our complicated lives have value and can be beautiful because God cares for us. The red paint reminds us of the blood of Christ, which was freely given and shed for our redemption. The blue paint can be a reminder of the fact that Christ is risen and ascended into heaven. If you trace the line of the knotwork, you'll find that it's continual. There is no end or beginning. You could interpret that as the things in life, good and bad, are happening over and over. Or it could be God at work in our lives. He loves us so much that he provided us with the redemption and walks beside us on our road through life. So thanks to Chris Yeager for making this beautiful Celtic cross.
We'll do St. Brendan's now.
Sure.
Okay, we'll do St. Brendan's. Okay. Maybe I should say something about St. Brendan's. Okay. St. Brendan was a monk in the 6th century, and like a lot of monks, Irish monks at that time, he and a group of his brothers set off on a pilgrimage for Christ, a peregrination. They got into a little boat called a currach, coracle, and they just set off out into the ocean, not knowing where they would end up. And this is kind of a fanciful retelling of their adventures. When I was a lad on the Emerald Isle, I heard many stories, both lovely and wild. Of the great dragons and monsters there be, that swallow the ships when they sail on the sea. Though I was an artist with canvas and paint, I sailed with St. Brendan and his jolly saints. We told the good people goodbye for a while. We sailed for St. Brendan's fair isle, fair isle. We sailed for St. Brendan's fair isle. We'd been on the ocean for 94 days when we came to a spot where the sea was ablaze. Those demons from Hades were dancing with glee and burning the sailors alive on the sea. Then St. Brendan walked on the blistering way. He threw all those demons straight back to their caves. And all of the saints wore a heavenly smile. We sailed for St. Brendan's fair isle, fair isle. We sailed for St. Brendan's fair isle. One night when the brethren were lying asleep, a great dragon came up from underneath. He thundered and lightened and made a great din. He that beautiful land. We all went to shore and we walked on the sand. We brought our long bows up and killed us some food. We roasted it up and had our barbecue. And after a while we were singing a song. We noticed the island was moving along. We ate and we drank and we rode in high style. We sailed for St. Brendan's Fair Isle. We sailed for St. Brendan's Fair Isle. Now Brendan says, boys, this is much to my wish. We ride on the back of the world's biggest fish. That is pulling the ship. We'll need it one day if this fish takes away. We sailed every ocean, we sailed every sea, we sailed every spot that a sailor could be. In 44 days we sailed 10 million miles. We sailed the St. Brendan's Fair Isle. We sailed the St. Brendan's Fair Isle. We sailed the St. Brendan's Fair Isle. We sailed for St. Brendan's Fair Isle.
Hello, my name is Gianna Soderstrom. I'm a creative nonfiction writer with the Anselm Arts Guild. I've been with the Arts Guild coming up on 2 years now, and as I was thinking about the prompt, I was kind of wondering, like, wow, where is this spiritual element bleeding into my everyday life? And it took me a while to kind of put a finger on it, and I started to panic because I was like, wait, is it there? Am I missing something? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that really it was just so enmeshed in everything that I do that I didn't even see it or pick it apart right away. And so I just, as you listen, I just want to encourage you that, like, if you can't find maybe what you think should be the element of the spiritual or wonder in your life, don't worry. Don't freak out about it. It's okay. It's probably there. And it's probably a lot more just ingrained in you and automatic than you think it is. When I was growing up, I used to sit on my bed and lean on the windowsill, breathing the sweet summer air and dreaming. The gauzy curtains lifted in the cool, fresh breezes, and the fluffy seeds of cottonwood trees drifted into the narrow corners of the open window until they amassed into tiny cotton clouds. I could see the horse barn and the dogs' kennels and a large silver shed where people paid to store their boats through the Minnesota winters. But that isn't what I looked at. Nobody sits at their window and dreams of a storage shed with boats earning $5 per foot of length. No, a few miles away there was a patch of woods in the middle of a golden soybean field. And through the middle of the woods was an opening that ran slanting through the trees so that even though it was open all the way through, I couldn't see the other end. And at the very front of this opening were 2 large oak trees, one on each side like arched guardians that came so near to touching in the middle that it was no matter if they didn't. I never asked who that land and those woods belonged to or how they'd come to be because I didn't want to hear some made-up story about how our neighbor Vernon or maybe old Merle Gustafson had bought the plot and torn down whatever farmstead used to be there and farmed it all up without bothering about the trees. Ridiculous. You don't see a magical oaken arch opening to a fair tunnel of trees like that and credit some homesteaders who wanted a windbreaker on their farm. You credit fairies. And perhaps, if you are lucky, you begin to realize that you are a fairy. Or an elf, rather. Fairies are smaller and more delicate, and elves, or at least tokens elves, are much more likely to be discovered eating venison and potatoes for dinner when they're finally called away from gazing out cotton-clouded windows towards the portal of return to their own world. If you have seen the grasslands of Minnesota, you understand that finding the world of magic and fairy in those long, unbroken prairies is not for the faint of heart, though perhaps no world of imagination is for the faint of heart. I lived on a small farm in the middle of a large plot of grass that was in the middle of 1,000,000 grain fields, give or take. There was no tricksy wood paths or meandering streams or even any winding roads. No, the dusty gravel roads were laid out in a grid, and each side was a mile square. Marvelous navigability, but no mystery, and I needed mystery. But that tunnel of trees was dim and uncertain, the other side hidden enough that I could believe one day I'd toss an emerald green cloak around my shoulders and slip through that arch by the light of the stars. The strong magic that held my ears soft and curved instead of pointed would finally release, and moonlight would catch on the curls of my hair as I stole silently out of this world and into my own. I realized many years ago that the old oak archway was frozen. Perhaps it was an unseen reign of evil on the otherworldly side that kept the gate from opening. Or perhaps it was the unending frigidity of the blizzards that howled straight down over my farm from the edge of Canada. But I recognized that I must look for the return of my elf ears in some other place, and I moved to Colorado. I have always longed for an over there, an other, a world unspoiled by the gray architecture of our cities, unlined by the straight, unending rows of our cornfields, and uncrossed by the grid of dusty gravel roads. But in the season of growing up and changing that coincided with my 1,000-mile move, I stopped truly looking for enchanted archways and started wishing they'd just find me. If enchantment didn't catch me off guard in the middle of an ordinary soybean field, then I hardly saw it at all. I began to live those years, limited by the rounded ears of a mere human, my vision more nearsighted than an elf both physically and spiritually. I spent some years walking, unseeing through the ordinary, the unenchanted. My feet were on the ground, but my head was never in the clouds. By the mysterious magic of God's ways and the passing of a few years, I now have 2 children, and recently I began to wonder how I might teach them to look for the extraordinary, the fantastic, the magical, the spiritual. I wondered if I could teach them anything, if I'd forgotten my own way to fairyland. Perhaps their childish wonder and wide-eyed exploration would be an awakening for me. Maybe, in some ways, I was the infant stripped of knowledge, and they knew better the ways into the worlds beyond sight. I began to let them teach me how to look, to admire the scaly twists of a broken twig, or the sing-song gurgle of water draining into a culvert. I caught again, slow but steady, the magic of a September leaf half crisp, half green, shed by a tree that, maybe, in the corner of my eye, winked as it turned to autumn gold. I remembered to hear the way that trees whisper secrets on the breeze, but songbirds drunk on spring will gossip merrily about anything. I saw an avenue of ancient trees and wondered which elves planted them. I discovered star lilies on the slope of an old road and knew that magic people must be near. But even then, all that was spirit-sprung and laughing seemed just beyond my reach, like a sunset glory flaming up from behind the mountains that leaves our city in dusky shadows. On evenings lately, I began taking walks out by myself to breathe the cool air. I learned to move my feet in time with my heart and the tap of leaves touching the ground, but the mountains still hid the sun. I walked in the rose-tinged dusk, but the light was high in the air above me. It is like living in the coming kingdom of God. It is here and it is not. It is right above me and all around me, but I cannot touch it or taste it or breathe it, not yet. But as I walked in the gold-topped trees with hope crunching in my steps, it echoed to me again and again. I am in it. I am in it. I am in it. As I slowly learned to walk with eyes and soul open again, the magic did find me, sudden as 2 old oaks rooted in the middle of a golden field. It breathed in the colors of dusk and the unplanned prints of leaves on the sidewalk. It blinks in the lilac tree beds that are ready for spring, and it drifts to accumulate with the blue-white snow. Perhaps its voice is the voice of the wind and the chickadee, and it laughs with the leaves as they skitter. I owe a debt of gratitude to Joy Clarkson for introducing me to the poetry of Malcolm Guite. His poem, The Singing Bowl, has become an anthem for me these days of rediscovering the magical and spiritual that hovers just outside and sometimes even inside my grasp. The first stanza opens with the words, "Begin the song exactly where you are, and rest you assured there is a song. It's echoing off our bones, vibrating us into motion. And even if we cannot hear it with our rounded human ears, remember that we never sing alone." My husband once turned to me, chin too serious for a half smile, but with eagerness in his eyes, and he said, "You have a vast inner world." But do I? Or have I simply learned to see the vast spirit world where fairies live in flowers, where a sunset flame burns the bowl of the sky like a burnished cathedral window, where promises of God float down like half-green falling leaves? Best songs.
I'm Evangeline Denmark, and I'm a fiction writer. I mostly write fantasy and mostly YA, but sometimes I write short stories. This story was written for a fellow Anselm Artist Guild member who was going through a particularly hard time. And one of my goals for the piece was to acknowledge the reality of the pain that we experience in our broken world and to make a space for it. I spent the last couple years researching Irish history and mythology and for a novel project, and I have been captivated by many aspects of St. Brigid, including her healing abilities. I thought taking a deeper look at what such an ability might cost would be a useful metaphor for exploring pain and weariness that we carry as we follow our callings as artists and as people. This is an entirely fictional vignette meant to highlight the humanity of a saint and the saintliness of a very dear human. In the green dark wood, for see, who lives and loves and creates, even though it hurts. In the green dark wood, where the tree trunks shove and groan in their struggle toward the sky, there lies a small, still pool with banks dressed in fallen leaves. High above the pool, the branches tangle and grasp for space to stretch their leafy arms, leaving only the slightest chink for the light to reach through. But at midday, when the sun reigns unchallenged in the sky, his rays filter through the woven canopy to brighten the green dark glade to shades of holy emerald and turn the water's surface to liquid light. It was midday when the maiden stumbled into the glade, her blue cloak torn and dusty, her hand clutched to her chest. She dropped to her knees amongst the quietly moldering leaves, and with a whimper lifted her hand from her breast. The fingers dangled limp and ruined. "Maiden, how came your hand to be injured?" The question fell in a voice low and wild like the call of a mourning dove. But the maiden was alone in the secret clearing. "Who speaks?" she asked. "A traveler such as yourself," the voice answered. "Do you follow the road to Kildare? Perhaps we have laid eyes upon one another." "My path is hidden." The response came in a sure, ringing tone, but when the traveler spoke again, his voice gentled to a sound like flowing water. "Daughter, tell me what misfortune has befallen you." The maiden cradled her damaged hand and gazed beyond the sparkling bower into the dark shadows. "Will you not show yourself, fellow traveler?" Air thick with the perfume of wild orchids shifted and swirled about the dell, bringing with it a mournful reply. "My visage is frightful, daughter. I do not wish to disquiet your soul." At this the woman rose and earnestly searched the dense forest. "Oh, suffering traveler, you need not fear to trouble me. I am called Brigid, and my companions are the downtrodden, my friends the cast out." "Brigid," the tone warmed into thick amber honey, "then you are the healer of Lugh." "I am," Brigid replied. "Will you uncover your head, daughter?" "I will." Brigid raised her uninjured hand. "Traveler, you will see why your own countenance need not trouble you." With steady fingers she swept the cowl from her face, revealing scars, pocks, and scabs marring flesh that should yet be young and smooth as milk. "Why are you so afflicted?" the voice asked. Brigid lifted her chin, and the ardent sunlight gilded her blood-red hair. "The wounds that I heal I bear upon my own body." "Your sacrifice is great," the traveler said. Tears welled in the maiden's eyes, and she lowered her head so that the drops landed on her lifeless hand. "Just now I happened upon a crofter's wagon. The wheel had broken, and as the man repaired it, his mare startled and tried to flee. His hand was crushed beneath the wagon's weight." "You took his injury upon yourself." "He would have starved, he and his family." A rustling noise stole around the glade, but the stranger did not emerge. His voice carried from deep within the forest. "Daughter, your suffering is seen. Do you wish it gone?" The maiden swayed. "In truth, I do. But such an injury is beyond even a druid's skill. I will bear it forever, as I bear the scars of my father's slaves and the scourge of chieftains and beggars alike." A cloud stole across the sun, plunging the glade into cold shadows. "There is more work to be done, but my flesh grows weary. I left the road and my companions, and I do not wish to go back." Silence choked the bower, and in the shadow of the cloud all color turned to gray, save the maiden's blue cloak and her crimson hair. At the very moment Brigid believed the traveler had left and that the sun had slipped from his sacred throne in the heavens, a goldfinch uttered his high, piercing call. In desperation, she searched for the little bird, for a messenger of hope amongst the dark and striving tree trunks. A flash of yellow feathers drew her eye to a tangled thicket. Deep in the heart of a thorn bush, a bird with a scarlet crown flitted from branch to branch, and just beyond the black bramble, a large shape moved through the trees. "Brigid," the wild coo came, "daughter of suffering, would you receive my wound as well?" A sob rose in Brigid's throat. She wished to hide herself in the bole of a mighty oak tree, to curl her body round her ruined hand, to sleep and never wake. But she stood on the bank of the still pool, her feet adorned with dead leaves, her scars unveiled. "I will," she said. On the other side of the thicket, a shadow shifted. A great silhouette took shape amidst the darkness, and the sound of sure hooves carried into the glade. Brigid readied herself to greet the traveler. But although the brambles parted and the clopping drew nearer, she could see no visitor. Fear swelled inside of her, and she stumbled. "I cannot see you, fellow traveler." "You will, daughter." No sooner had the voice reached Brigid's ears than a sharp pain pierced her breast. She looked down to see blood staining the blue threads of her cloak just over her heart. "I am to sleep," she thought. But when she raised her head, before her stood a wondrous creature, a pure white horse with mane and tail of shimmering pearl. A great horn, white as foamy wave caps, grew from the middle of the beast's forehead, and the very tip of it was dark with Brigid's blood. "I cannot comprehend this marvel," Brigid said. "Why have you done this to me?" The voice emanated from the creature. "You said you would take my wound. You were willing to share my suffering. Your sacrifice has opened your eyes to see me." "I am glad." The words flowed over Brigid's lips as her heart blood flowed from her wound. The chill of the shadowed glade seeped into her toes, and the pain of her broken hand remained, but she gazed on the majestic beast with no thought but delight. The creature walked to the pool and lowered his noble head, plunging the blood-stained horn into the water. When he raised his head and tossed his mane, the strands shimmered like moonlight. Brigid was transfixed, her pain forgotten. But when the animal gazed upon her with holy dark eyes, she remembered her scars and scabs. How could such a creature look upon her? She raised her cloak to cover her face. "Do not hide yourself, for I would look upon my maiden fair." Brigid shrank within her covering. "My scars make me unworthy." "Then as you have shared my suffering, so I will share yours. Enter the pool, daughter of sorrows." Brigid hesitated. The shadows crept out from the tree roots, stretching over the leaf carpet toward her feet. But the mighty beast stepped between her and the grasping darkness. A faint glow danced on the pool's surface, and the palest green returned to the leaves. Brigid shed her cloak and stepped into the still water. She let her limp fingers glide amongst the gentle ripples, and then sank down into the cool depths until the water covered her burnished head. When she rose from the pool, the sun emerged from the usurping cloud. His light ignited the water's surface and turned every droplet into a glittering diamond. The creature stood in the shadows, rimming the now bright glade, and as Brigid neared, he raised his majestic face to hers. Silvery scars marked his once smooth hide, and he lifted his foreleg as if it caused him pain, and there on his snowy breast a wound bloomed red as a rose. At the sight, the maiden's heart throbbed with a sweet ache. She raised 2 whole, unblemished hands to her chest, touching the flesh the horn had pierced. Gone were the blood and the broken skin. Only a scar, soft and pale as a snowdrop petal, remained. The voice rang through the dell once again, mighty and deep like the wind through evergreen boughs. "Do you find me ugly for my scars, maiden?" With healed but hesitant fingers, Brigid traced the marks on the creature's soft hide. "I find you beautiful," she said. "Daughter, my beauty is yours and your suffering is mine. Now take up your cloak, go back to the road, back to your companions, and back to the work that awaits you. But when your suffering is great, come to the still pool and share your burdens with me. I am never far from your side, Brigid of Kildare. You can always find me here in the green dark wood."
Hey friends, I am standing in for Corey Denmark. He has this beautiful piece that he created for our Celtic prompt, and he was a little shy about reading it, so I'm going to do that for him. You can tease Corey later. All right, this piece is called The Crow's Gate. And he says, pre-Christian Irish folks considered birds of all kinds as spiritual creatures. So when Christianity came to Ireland and the often difficult to understand concept of the Holy Trinity was introduced to them, They quickly correlated the Holy Spirit with birds. This spiritual connection can be seen in their pre- and post-Christian works of art and literature. The symbolism of a bird as a spiritual being permeates many of the cultures in that area of the world, including the Vikings and other Scandinavian people groups. They are often seen as an advisor or as a messenger for the spirit world. This piece of art tells part of a longer story of a girl convicted of a crime and sentenced to death. She pleads for forgiveness to whomever would listen. But it's a crow outside the window of her jail cell who hears her supplication. The crow frees her and leads her away from her accusers, who then pursue her relentlessly. During her long flight for freedom, she learns to communicate with the crow, who responds more with notions or urges or revelations. Eventually, her pursuers catch up with them, and she is shot with an arrow through her shoulder. Soon after, they corner her up against a stone wall with a locked gate set in it. This is the crow's gate, and only the crow can unlock it and set her free into the land beyond reach. This part of her story ends as the crow ushers her through the gate and stays behind to defend her against her accusers. This piece was composed in a 3D program on Corey's computer and was meant to merely be a reference from which he could draw or paint. However, he ran out of time to do the drawing, so rendered this scene and did some Photoshop manipulation on the resulting image. He printed a hard copy and decoupaged the print onto a piece of canvas board. And the decoupage spirit he overlaid, he overlaid elements of the original image with straw, flowers, metal, feathers, gold leaf, and paint. The Crow's Gate by Corey Denmark.
Hi, I'm Megan McCluskey, and I've been part of the Anselm Society Art Guild for about a year, maybe a little bit more. And I just love the Anselm Society. It's been one of the most enriching and life-giving parts of my life since joining. So I'm so glad to be part of this and to share my paintings with you today. I've been, during this quarantine period and with just needing to process the grief of the pandemic and everything, turning to my painting and focusing primarily on Pikes Peak, or Sun Mountain as the first Ute people called it when they were here a long time ago and still are here today. And so standing outside painting the mountain has reminded me of the transcendent and ultimate truth of God, because mountains don't tend to move. So, and especially Pikes Peak being in Colorado Springs and always just right there. We live our lives at the foot of it, and it doesn't change. When God's teaching me something, he never tells it to me in one way, and you've probably experienced that too. So the way that I'm kind of processing that is there's clouds in front of the mountain sometimes. The light filters through in different ways, and depending where I am in proximity to it, whether I'm on the north side of town, east, whether I'm in Woodland Park or further south, it's gonna look different, but it is the same mountain. So even though I can be in a different relationship visually, physically with the mountain, it's always the same mountain. And God is the same way. He's always the same God, no matter where I'm at, no matter what's covering, no matter what's blocking my view. He's always there, and he's always the same. So as I'm kind of processing this and just this unchangeable nature of our Heavenly Father, I am anticipating this pub night that's a couple months late, of course. I was looking into the biography of St. Patrick, and maybe you know the story, but he was born in Britain and then kidnapped by Irish raiders when he was 16 years old, and he lived as a slave for 6 years. He eventually escaped, ran away, and through what sounds like a very dangerous journey, eventually made it home and had a vision at some point with the Irish holding their arms out to him and calling him the voice of the Irish and beseeching him to come back to Ireland. So a lot of the different articles I read talked about how he was, he didn't think it was the right thing for him to do. Like, he wasn't the right person. He lacked the education to be that person for the people of Ireland, for the Irish people. And so he got into the Roman Catholic Church, was spiritually formed there, became a priest, and then went back to the Irish to bring them Jesus. And to me, that's an unthinkable move, to revisit the most traumatic, dangerous, awful part of your memories, of your story, of your life story, and to walk among those people again and to try and help them is crazy. So that's my initial reaction. And so just processing that, a quote came to mind from something I had recently read in the essays. There's a book by James Baldwin called The Fire Next Time. And James Baldwin, he was an African-American. He wrote fiction and nonfiction at the time of the civil rights and onward. So 1963, he wrote in an essay, which is addressed as a letter to his nephew. There is no reason for you to try to become like white people, and there is no basis whatever for their impertinent assumption that they must accept you. The really terrible thing, old buddy, is that you must accept them. You must accept them and accept them with love. These people have no other hope. They are, in effect, still trapped in a history which they do not understand. And until they understand it, they cannot be released from it. So I'm just amazed by the connection that I'm seeing between a 5th century Irish Catholic missionary and a 20th century African-American, highly educated, he was a professor, writer. And when a truth, this is the truth that I'm getting from both of these figures, is they could both see the unseen captivity of the people who had hurt and abused them. They could see the evil lurking behind the injustice they suffered. So they were able to see something that is not easy to see, something, the evil behind it. And in Ephesians 6, you can remember it says, we do not battle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this dark world. And to see a truth like that pop up in 400 something Common Era and also in 1963 is something that I want to pay attention to. And it brings me back to this unchangeable nature of God and how the truth can transcend time and space, and that's a really firm footing for me. And so that makes it worth it to keep painting the same mountain as a metaphor for that truth over and over again. And so I plan to do more and from different angles, and as the weather and the seasons change, just to keep reminding myself of that. Something that I admire about St. Patrick is when he went to the Irish to bring them Jesus, he didn't try and change their culture. He incorporated all the magic and mystery of their culture into the Catholicism and the tradition that he brought. And I think that's why we admire Irish Christianity so much. It's mystical and whimsical at times and beautiful, like the Celtic cross. And I just admire him for doing it in that way and being sensitive to the people that were there. And about James Baldwin, he said his personal mission was to bear witness to the truth. He didn't consider himself an activist. He didn't consider himself a leader. He just said, I'm going to write about what I see and I'm going to write the truth. And that is just so important because the truth will set you free.
Thou My Vision, which has a Gaelic text from the 9th century. The tune is called Slane, which is an interesting name because Slane is the name of the hill where St. Patrick lit a bonfire on the eve of Easter to defy the priests of the Druids in Ireland when they were holding a festival of their own. That's the name of the tune, Slane, and the name of the words in English is Be Thou My Vision. Be thou my vision, Lord of my heart. Not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought, my day or by night. Waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I am with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou